Welcome to the first episode of Argue with Your Mama, Not Me. Yes, every time I say the title of this podcast, I'm going to say it just like that. So I'm going to repeat this one more time for everybody that's listening, for everybody in the back. Welcome to the very first episode of a Citizen the Pod mini-series called Argue with Your Mama, Not Me. I am so excited to be back on the mic. Well, I'm not really on the mic because it's virtual, but y'all get what I'm saying. And I have two really awesome guests here with me. So I told y'all in the first segment that I was going to be joined by my Black Box political consulting firm colleagues. So I'm so excited to introduce y'all to them. This is their first time on the pod. They have not been on any other season. And I'm excited to have a conversation with them about some real spicy stuff today. So first, I'm going to turn it right over to my girl, Kartika, to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kartika. I'm one of the principal consultants for Black Box Political Consulting Firm. And I'm really excited to share my thoughts on these great topics that we have today. And I'm gonna slide it over to Dejan.
John, principal consultant at Black Box. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to be playing a bit of devil's advocate because I think we all agree. So look out for that.
That's good because I really know you actually agree with us, but you got to do what you got to do. Like you already know that you got a spicy personality. So kick it up for my listeners. All right, so we're going to jump right into this. So I'm going to start this episode with a quote from my favorite, the most viral rapper, Bosie Badass. And I quote, "You gives no fucks about how blacks have died and suffered to the hands of white men. And you say Bush don't like black people? Really, nigga?" Yes, that's a quote from the one and only Bosie Badass. But first, we're going to hop right into a little conversation, though, before we get to Bosie, because you know he keeps it spicy and sets things on fire. Well, I guess it's definitely fitting in for me to turn this conversation over to Jeffrey Dahmer. So listen, I've been watching and obsessed with Netflix's release of Jeffrey Dahmer. I had no clue about this case or the background of this story, but the minute I turned it on, I was obsessed. So, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer is now one of the most watched shows on Netflix. And before it aired, again, I did not know much about it, but I'm here to get everybody's opinion on the case, white supremacy, the beginning of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and how people, you know, the cops were standoffish about even talking to people about gayness and felt that something was going to jump off and catch them or bite them. They was going to get the gay bug or something. But, you know, and then again, on the show, it was clear that Black people's voices were completely ignored, not taken seriously, while the man is literally in the apartment next door sawing somebody apart and they're yelling and screaming. So what are y'all thoughts on this Jeffrey Dahmer case? I know that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about even telling this story. What do y'all think? Kartika?
I was gonna go because Dejan will stare me down. I mean, I guess my thoughts are just kind of like, I didn't, just full disclosure, I didn't watch the series because I'm fully aware of the case, and I didn't watch it with the intent of that. I don't need to see or have watched this being played out of Black lives being lost in any form, and Black gay lives specifically. And I think, you know, during this time that this was happening, right, it was a time in which folks were afraid of gay people because they said this was the gay disease, right? Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, they were Black. So they were Black and they were gay. No one cared. And it gave them a reason to be kind of dismissive. But also, I mean, everything is rooted in white supremacy. So the fact that they ignored people going missing, the fact that they ignored the neighbors making numerous complaints, the fact that they ignored, you know, the Black voice calling and saying there is something wrong, there's a foul odor, there's people screaming. I've seen most people go out and they don't come back. Like the fact that all of that was completely ignored is not surprising because it still happens in modern day, even outside of scenarios like that, right? Like here in Buffalo, how many people have gone missing or how many people have died in the past 6 months due to domestic violence after having numerous complaints to police? Like, this is not uncommon, right? Black folks, I remember God rest her soul, the young lady that died this past week,
Right.
put up a post on Facebook and saying, like, why am I calling the police for help when they're not going to help me? And I've been calling them numerous times saying like something is wrong, and they're basically ignoring her, and only to post that and then within a week, be murdered by her abuser. So, are we really in a post era of that? No, there's a continuation of that. It just changes forms and changes, areas, but definitely, the ignoring of Black women specifically, has been detrimental to multiple generations and multiple ethnic groups and people of different backgrounds.
Right.
Well, hard to follow that. Largely agree. First off, Keena, you're not low mentioning Boosie. If my son was gay, I'd hire a prostitute to turn him straight badass to segue into a show about a white man killing Black gay men. Boosie might as well be right up there with Dahmer, as homophobic as he is.
Agreed.
I agree with everything that Kartika said related to just ignoring Black queer lives as well as Black women when they're trying to rectify something wrong. I think that show really exemplified how white folks use their privilege to cover up their misdeeds. I mean, I recently just watched episode 1 and it was kind of uncomfortable to see how easily Jeffrey Dahmer let in the cops to tour his apartment after he had just attempted murder on a Black queer man and felt comfortable enough to walk them around and use gay images as a means of misdirecting their attention. Again, I think that really just highlights what Kartika has already pointed out. I'll leave it at that for now.
We're gonna have to just schedule a whole nother episode just to talk about Bosie and how problematic he is. But okay, I agree with both of y'all there too. One quick thing that I wanted to mention to y'all is I've heard that they're attempting to go after bail reform in lieu of this young man being let out after he got arrested for domestic violence. So I don't know if this is a rumor. I don't know if this was in a paper, but we all know that's bullshit. But I wanted to hear if y'all had any opinion on that.
Yeah, that is real. They have been for a while trying to go after different things. The multiple thefts that were happening and break-ins for cars that happened over this summer and last summer, they've been trying to attack bail reform. And I think a lot of folks are open to some modifications like domestic violence, only because of it's typically a safety for the victim. And so, but also just reminding folks that bail reform also includes judiciary discretion. So if the judge thinks this person is a harm to society, even though bail reform is in place and that they could be let go with the appearance ticket or could be early released, they don't have to sit in for longer periods of time, the judge could say still, hey, this person is actually a danger to the victim. We think he may go off and harm them. And they can actually not give them, they cannot let them post bail. So I think instead of looking at bail reform, we still need to be holding judges accountable in these instances as well.
So I think it's, Miles just joined. I'd love to hear Miles' perspective on bail reform and in particular, how law enforcement handles domestic violence or intimate partner violence calls. It is my understanding that in New York State, there is a mandatory arrest requirement in cases of domestic violence where there is other offenses like harassment, assault, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know the details of the case in Buffalo and why they're using that case to highlight the flaws or alleged flaws in bail reform. But I'd be very interested to see whether, or to learn whether this gentleman or the alleged murderer was arrested when the now deceased victim reached out to law enforcement previously. I'd love to know the circumstances because it could be, and again, I don't know much about the case, it could be that they just failed to abide by what they should have done, which is something we see often with policing in this country.
My name is Miles Gresham. I am a principal consultant, legal counsel at Black Box Political Consulting.
Hi, everybody. Um, Sorry I'm late. I thought we were doing this at 7. So yeah, Dijon, I just jumped on, so I'm not quite sure the case that you're talking about, but generally in New York State, it's not a mandatory arrest, but the police have discretion to arrest someone anytime there's a domestic violence case. Yeah. They can arrest. They don't have to give an appearance ticket, which is something that they have to do for lower level offenses. But they can make a custodial arrest in any domestic violence case. And also, with respect to bail, if you anytime there's a domestic violence allegation, there's almost always an order of protection, a temporary order of protection filed. If the defendant violates that order of protection, then they can be held, and cash bail can be put on them. So that's the context of kind of what the rules are, but I'm not sure of the particulars of this case. If you want to run them by me, or not, that's okay too.
No, much like you, I don't know the particulars, but to be clear, there actually is a mandatory arrest law related to domestic violence. And I only know that because I recently went through a specific training with RPD going over that law. So where there is cause to believe that there was a misdemeanor or felony, when responding to a call of domestic violence, the officers who respond must make a mandatory arrest. But again, I don't know.
Was that for a felony, did you say?
Misdemeanor or felony. So it's far reaching. It could be as low as harassment and as high as assault or a robbery that would give grounds for mandatory arrest.
Well, harassment's a violation. So I don't.
Yeah, well, harassment, I think some of the higher degrees are misdemeanor.
It has to be like a higher degree of harassment, though, not like violation level, right? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you, all of you, for chiming in on that subject. We're going to keep it moving because y'all know I got a long list and I already sent you all the script. So we're going to keep this thing buzzing. But, you know, we talked a little bit about white supremacy and how, you know, cops were not taking Black voices seriously during that Jeffrey Dahmer case. And we're gonna just pivot real quick to discuss y'all's boy, Kanye West. He broke the internet again this week, doing what he does best, pandering to white people at the expense of Black lives. So what say you on the Kanye West White Lives Matter t-shirt?
I just have to say this because I just have to. I don't necessarily trust anything that Kanye does at this point, like that it's not for publicity and it's often at the expense of our own people. And I don't really care to argue or to understand, you know, why he did it. Oh, well, I was just letting them know, like, we know white lives, like, we don't have to even go through this. We know white lives matter. Like, that's not a thing. Like, we don't have to talk about it. But I think that's a really important point that a lot of people keep talking about. It's his mental illness issues. And I just want to make it very clear. Having mental illness issues don't make you racist or don't make you prejudiced or don't allow you to misalign yourself in this way, right? You know, because they try and use that a lot of times when white supremacists are going to jail for these terrorist attacks that they do, right? He was mentally ill and no, this is not your mental illness. You're just an asshole. Like, and that could just be okay. Like, if that's who you are, that's fine. If this is who he's becoming, hell, him and Candace Owens might go and get married after this. That might all be, and that would be all well and fine with me. But if this is the person that he's showing us to be, that this is who he is, allow him to be that person. It may be disappointing, it may be gut-wrenching, and it may hurt because he's a member of the culture. And I think he's impacted my life personally and a lot of other Black lives because of all that he's produced and given to, you know, our culture. But we also have to call a spade a spade. And I think he fucked up on this one.
I know we got some other comments. What's up, Dejan or Miles?
I guess I'll reply in my easy ensemble here. First and foremost, you can never really tell what Kanye is up to. On the one hand, he puts out this stupid White Lives Matter t-shirt. On the other hand, he's starting to open brick and mortar storefronts that are exclusively owned by Black people. So he's promoting to white audiences, but taking all this money to the Black folks, which is a bit confusing because he's sending one message and doing something else behind the scenes. Can everyone hear me? Good. So I'm not clear on what Mr. West's motive is. Haven't been for a while. I think it's a bit dismissive to say that some of his actions are not the result of his mental illness. When we know that for some mental illnesses, there is a higher likelihood of obsessing over asinine ideas. Like it's actually pretty common amongst people with mental illness. There's a reason, and not to insult religion, but there is a reason why folks who are like bipolar or schizophrenia tend to turn deeper inward spiritually or religiously to find reason and to justify their actions. But that's not to say that, of course, there's something inherently flawed with being religious or that it justifies their behavior. I just think that we need to be a bit more understanding and come with, I think, a degree of empathy. Like even if I pivot back to Jeffrey Dahmer real quick, as I was watching the show, like that man was clearly bothered, right? His actions were abhorrent. They were clearly wrong, but something was also wrong within. So I'm not going to say that mental health doesn't come with some of these more negative effects. I'll leave it there for now.
Kartika, do you have any rebuttals for Dejan, or you think that, he made a valid point?
I mean, yes, with certain mental illnesses, speaking on that in particular, like, yes, with certain mental illnesses, they can become asphyxiated on certain ideologies and kind of like go down a rabbit hole with that. And I think that that's actually a part of him being a bipolar. But I'll definitely, and I agree with that. And I think he kind of has his manics, right? And you kind of saw him losing control with the whole Kim thing and his fighting with celebrities and just going on these rants of things that like we didn't need to talk about, right? The same person who, put his queen, as he called her, on a pedestal for 10 years and then starts attacking her. And it's just like, well, I mean, you married her, you had 4 kids with her, like she left you didn't leave her, right? And now she's a terrible person. I think him kind of just spiraling with that and I think ironically enough, his mother being who she was and being so like pro-Black, and how he clings to the love and the memory of his mother, but does the exact opposite of what she would have stood for. I've been really interested in like wanting to know how and if this is any way connected. Like, am I purposely being a letdown of someone that I admire because I feel like I'll never be good enough now that she's not here? Or like, is that causing a spiral? Is he internalizing some of those issues as well, causing to his actions? So I'm really interested in. I'm intrigued by him. I'm not I'm condoning what he's doing, but I am intrigued by all that he's been displaying. I'll put it that way.
Can y'all hear me now?
Sure can.
Yeah.
That's better. Okay. We're still talking about Kanye.
Yes.
His ridiculousness. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. So like I was trying to say, like, and Kartika said this, like, obviously white lives matter. The reason that there's a Black Lives Matter movement is because white people don't get murdered by the police as a matter of routine. And when white people are killed by the police, there are generally consequences if the use of force was inappropriate, right? Just to kind of, I know we all know that, but just to clarify for our listeners, right? So like, but the thing is, Kanye is a provocateur, right? And the left, for all of its benefits, one of the things that the trap that we have kind of fallen into in the last 10 years is being really overly sensitive about language. And it's almost gotten to the point where, even though it's the right that is literally banning books and taking away women's bodily autonomy in states that they control, the left is seen as the side that is overly sensitive, the side that will, protest someone coming to campus instead of like allowing them to speak in the, under the name of free speech or whatever. And so I think there's a lot of room for an artist like Kanye to play with that and to get under people's skin and to get publicity very easily. Whereas if we were a culture that just kind of ignored it and said, okay, whatever, maybe he wouldn't be doing those things. But the other thing is that, and we see this whenever Black people, go up the ladder in terms of material wealth and in terms of ingratiation with, wealthy white society, they almost fall over themselves to talk about how much they love white folks, right? I mean, that's what they do. I mean, look at our political leaders, right? Very few of them are the ones like standing up and trying to change things in terms of how police treat Black people, right? Or try to move any kind of policy in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? It's almost there's a penalty when you get to a certain level in our society as a Black person, and don't go out of your way to make white people feel comfortable. Yeah. And so I think maybe, someone like Kanye, who has been in that world for so long, might be, dealing with that compounded with his very obvious mental health issues. But really, like, I don't really care. I don't really care about Kanye West. I don't care about Candace Owens. I haven't really cared about any of his musical output since like Jesus. So it's fine. Like, he can do what he wants to do. And there will always be Black folks who want to show how much, and there's a market for that, right? Like if you're an intelligent Black person and you can't get in with the sort of Black intelligentsia, there's always room for you to go to the other side and be like a token, and so, he's playing, I think, with that and with the sort of sensitivity over language that we have on the left in our society. And it is what it is.
All right. Well, thank you for keeping it so spicy, because you're right. We should not care at this point. We should not. But
you have to pivot on that.
I mean, I am about to pivot on that because we don't have all day. We need to have a Black Lives Matter episode. We need to have, because he definitely said Black Lives Matter is bullshit and a scam. And, there are some, listen, I'm not going to get into that because we need to keep going, because we're talking about token Negroes, and Herschel Walker is definitely one down in Georgia. And we might as well pivot to the fact that this man paid for his abortions, but wants to outright ban abortion if he was to ever get to the Senate. Like, the man is crazy. His son went on a rant, but let me just talk a little bit about this. So last week, the Daily Beast reported with receipts that Herschel Walker, he's a former football player in Georgia. Anybody know what college he played for? Georgia State? He played, listen, somebody Google it for me, come back, let me know so we can tell our people the right place. But he's a former football player in Georgia. He's actually dumb as a box of rocks. He does not ever get on TV and really speak in coherent sentences. He repeats what he's heard on Fox News. He repeats what Donald Trump told him to say before he started. So, they went down there to Trump went down there to Georgia, found him a token Negro, and decided he was going to run him against another well-educated Black man, pastor of Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, Senator Raphael Warnock, who is, clearly, and I won't say clearly, because some, listen, Black people are not a monolith. We all don't agree on all topics, on all social topics. There are a lot of religious Black people who are against abortion of any kind. However, he, to me, answered the question the way I wanted to hear it in regards to abortion. He doesn't plan to go to the Senate and abolish abortion, even though he's a pastor. So, I want to get all of y'all's opinion on Herschel Walker The fact that he got receipts for paying for this abortion, and just the idea that they could not find a better Republican candidate out of Georgia. Like, there are very smart Black people in Georgia, like tons. HBCUs down there, and you mean to tell me you couldn't find not one intelligent Black man in Georgia, like literally the mecca of Blackness at this point in this country? You couldn't find one smart Black Republican to run. You went and found the dumbest one and thought name recognition was going to get you there. And I'm appalled. Any thoughts on that?
For clarity, he did play for the Cowboys, Vikings, Eagles, Giants, and then retired playing for the Cowboys. Again,
the CTE has kicked in. Well, let me stop.
It's. I mean, he said he wasn't smart. He told us. He said it. I'm not smart. He's giving Trump, like, I know I ain't the smartest, but shit, I'm gonna do it. I mean, that's what we're getting from him. And the fact that like his son kind of had to come out, and a lot of people attacked his son, which, you know, I'm not a fan of Christians, but I agreed with him, you know, when he was, you know, going on his spiel about, you know, I talk about these things. I wasn't hiding these things. I didn't blatantly say my father did X, but the reason why I talk about, family abandonment and issues with, you know, fatherhood abandonment is because I experienced that, and I knew me and my mother could have ended this, right? But for the sake of what we thought we wanted politically, or what we thought we could have had, and kind of having that end, as we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Like, the other side will always accept you. So this is where we stand. And now they have accepted us. And now we have the chance to climb this ladder politically, only for it to backfire because your dad is a literal idiot, but also didn't think about repercussions of his history coming up. And you know, when it comes to politics, as we have seen before in local, state, and federal politics, they will find receipts on you, as many as they can, on anything they can, and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, conservatives have kind of a history, though, of not finding the smartest Black people to represent Black people. That's kind of part of their agenda, right? They don't want someone who's too smart. They want someone that they can manipulate and control. But we also have to remember that, you know, generally Republicans, it stopped being about intelligence with them a long time ago, right? I mean, they voted for George W. Bush because he was a guy that you could have a beer with, right? I mean, like, anti-intellectualism runs strong in this country on both sides, but particularly on the right. And so I think, you know, Herschel Walker is exactly the kind of person that they want. Plus, they get to say, oh, I voted for a Black person, right? One of the reasons that these tokens are so important to the right, and you'll see, I mean, you look at the head of the Proud Boys, right? He's a brown Hispanic man, right? They want people like this because if you have Black and brown, usually men, but you know, you also have pick-me's like Candace Owens. If you have these people, right, it becomes, they're like shields, right? Whenever you say, oh, these people are racist, these people are evil, well, they can hold up, you know, Herschel Walker or Candace Owens or Kanye West and say, oh, no, look, or the head of the Proud Boys and say, oh, no, look, you know, we have people of color on our side too. And when the left doesn't engage with them, because it's exhausting too, but when we don't raise those like nuances, again, we look crazy, right? Because, you know, we're shouting about, you know, racism, and here they are, you know, voting for Black senators, right? So in their minds, how could they be racist, right? How could there be a problem? So, you know, Herschel Walker is exactly the kind of person that Republicans want. And I think that's why they're running with them. They don't want intelligent Black people, you know, because that would be, they would be harder to manipulate and to control. Generally, I'm sure that there are some intelligent Black Republicans that they could have gone with. But again, anti-intellectualism is generally the vibe on the right. And so Black or white, you know, whether we're talking about Louis Gohmert or, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene or, you know, Herschel Walker, I mean, Sarah Palin, George W. Bush, like the people who rise to the top in that party are generally not the smartest and haven't been for a while, because it's not about intelligence. Intelligence suggests and reason suggests that, you know, you don't ban abortions, that you don't ban books. That's not what they're about. They are about authoritarianism and, you know, a certain amount of idiocy is always helpful when you're trying to advance stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to say on this because I just don't think Herschel Walker is worthy of conversation. He's up against a Morehouse man that went to Union Theological Seminary at Columbia University, who is one of the most well-respected senators in the US Senate as it stands today. He is one of the reasons we got a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed by siding with, of all people, Ted Cruz on an amendment that ultimately led to its passage. I think it's a disrespect to his legacy and his time and to our time to even spend one iota of time on Herschel Walker. But that's where I stand on that. I will say, however, that the idiocy that my good friend Miles spoke on greatly exists on the left as well. It's just a bit more polished. I mean, you got folks like Sleepy Joe up in office, who's not the brightest president in the world. You had Obama, who was brilliant, but who had to play the same type of politics. I mean, when we saw that man sit with, I forget the name of the Harvard professor and grab a beer with the white security officer, he was doing the same sort of down-to-earth politics that George W. Bush was famous for. And that same dumbed-down level of politics led to, I think, the election of Donald Trump and sort of led us to the moment that we're in today. So I don't want to just solely point at the right, like, hey, you idiots are breaking down our country. It's a right and a left thing, really.
Well, I would agree. I would say, though, that, Joe Biden, with decades as a senator in Delaware, has a little bit more of an intellectual pedigree than someone like Donald Trump. But again, this is who we have to compete against, right? And so for all of us, I mean, it's like if you lose to stupid people, how smart are you, right? That's kind of my question. And so, for all of our intelligence and accolades within, the progressive side of things, we are losing to idiots like constantly. And this is, for decades now. And so at some point, I think we have to acknowledge that, maybe the people that we are trying to get to vote for us, we're missing them, and there's something about that kind of fundamental humanity that Republicans understand about their constituents and that Democrats really don't or haven't acknowledged. And that's why, the fact that Herschel Walker even has a chance against someone with a pedigree like Warnock's, I think speaks to how badly intellectuals are losing in this country.
Well, I'm going to chime in here because I think, Republicans at this point, I feel like they're trying to keep it real. I think everything that you all said is correct, but I'm going to let you listen to Dana Loesch. She's the former NRA chairman, I believe, and it's her thoughts on Herschel Walker.
So does this change anything? I mean, do you want my opinion? Not a damn thing. How many times have I said 4 very important words? These 4 words. Winning is a virtue. What I'm about to say is in no means a contradiction or a compromise of a principle. And please keep in mind that I am concerned about one thing and one thing only at this point. So I don't care if Herschel Walker paid to abort endangered baby eagles. I want control of the Senate. If the Daily Beast story is true, you're telling me Walker used his money to reportedly pay some skank for an abortion, and Warnock wants to use all of our monies to pay a whole bunch of skanks for abortions. And yes, when they're used predominantly over 99% of birth control, and it's my taxpayer dollars, you have invited me up in your business and I will use whatever descript I would like to. Thank you.
So, Dana kept it 100. She basically told us, look, it's about winning. It's about maintaining control of the Senate. It's about making sure that skanks, Black people, Other people of color don't get the necessities they need when they need it. But, you know, rich people, as long as you can pay for it and fund it, you can get access to whatever it is that you want. Like, she kept it 100. Any thoughts on Dana?
I think that
Dana
kind of
is-
single-minded determination is really what the left and what Democrats have been lacking. I'm not saying that we should be like her, but I mean, I think about, you know, us getting rid of Al Franken, right?
Mhm.
And like the low, you know, just the, you know, and then meanwhile, Republicans, you know, Donald Trump and his escapades, right? Matt Gaetz and you know, him, you know, paying for, or allegedly paying for an, you know, a underage girl, you know, to travel to sleep with. I mean, they don't care, because for them, winning is the virtue, right? Winning is the point. Once you win, they can impose their will on the country. And that's something that Democrats, I wish that we thought like that, because it would make our jobs so much easier. But we have to always, you know, go through all this virtue signaling bullshit with everybody, and, you know, all these platitudes and all this, you know, sort of like Facebook morality that we are subject to. And that, I think, is a big part of the anti-intellectualism on the left. All right. That kind of gets in our way of winning and of you know, shaping this country in the way that we want it shaped. So I don't agree with Dana on Herschel Walker, but in terms of how she thinks about winning, I wish more of us were there.
Dejan, you had a few words, or he said it for you?
No, he absolutely said it. I think Democrats need to get better at winning, and in particular, really need to focus on how they drive narratives in the media. I know, you know, related to the Herschel Walker thing, there was all this uproar after the decision that overturned Roe that just kind of completely died over time. And Democrats did a terrible job at keeping up that anger amongst women voters that really could have driven their party to not only be in the lead leading up to this midterm, but damn near guaranteed to win the Senate and maintain the House. They just don't seem to be focused on winning to the same degree that Republicans. And in order for this country, I think, to be steered in a better direction, they really need to be concerned in the same way that that woman suggested.
So I would argue that, because Roe is clearly one of the topics I wanted to end this podcast on, and I wanted to discuss, you know, Democrats' chances to do better in this midterm than we expected because of Roe. But I think the issue is that the American people has literally the attention span of like a 2-year-old. And if this decision was made today, we would be coasting into the midterm probably for a win, because it'd be 30 days after. But the fact that it was in May, we had all this nonsense happen through, you know, since then. I mean, I just feel like it would have been difficult. Like you said, messaging for the Democrats has always been off. They've never been able to really keep steam or figure out what's the right message to really rattle the base. And, you know, the message for the last election was Trump was trash, but Trump did everything for us, even leading up to the election, to continue to remind us that he was trash. If he would have ever took a pivot and accepted that COVID was a real thing, and decided that he was going to actually be presidential, because actually a pandemic is an alley-oop for any sitting president. As long as you act like you give a damn, you could have rolled the coattails of a pandemic doing the most, but acting like you gave a shit, and he could have won. But that's not Trump. That's not who Trump is. Trump is, he's an asshole. He is going to continue. He continually fucked up all the way to the election in order for Joe Biden to win. But he literally in the last hour had an opportunity to switch things up finally and become what folks wanted, presidential. He just chose not to. So I think that, you know, it's not really the Democrats' fault. I really think it's about timing. I think at this point, And because we know as consultants, we understand the party apparatus, it's really up to each individual candidate to do that work, right? We can't have direct conversations with PACs. We can't tell them where to put money. But Republicans seem to me do a better job on the PAC level at when they do have money, knowing how to spend it and how to be on the attack to keep your attention. Maybe our PACs are pussy too, but I really don't think that it's the fault of the Democratic Party as a whole to not stay on message for Roe, because when they do get an opportunity to get on TV, they do talk about it. But I think individual races are doing better at having those discussions. You got the Ohio race and the fact that, the Democrat out of Ohio is actually doing okay. And I think it's because he's staying, he's drilling down a message. The Democrat out of Pennsylvania is doing okay right now against Mastriano. But again, Mastriano is a psycho and he says crazy things, and he's attached to Christian nationalist organizations that can be continually, prodded. But I want to flag the fact that Keisha Lance Bottoms recently came out and said Democrats have a problem in Georgia because Black people are not excited to vote. And if it's happening in Georgia that way, the polls can be in our favor for Mark Kelly against a crazy kook in Arizona. But should we even fucking trust the polls? Because the fucking polls told us we was up on Trump 6 years ago, and that was a lie too. So, should we take those more localized voices seriously, like a Keisha Lance Bottoms? And I'm not really sure what the Democratic Party can do, because I agree with you. We should be riding the coattails of Roe. Those conversations are happening on a state level from what I can see through my own experience, but the midterms is just not a presidential election, and people are fucking sick of us in politics. So they really only like to tap in every 4 years. What do you think we can do to excite people on the issues that matter? And Roe is like that's some serious shit. Just because the decision has really opened up an opportunity for them to go after gay marriage. It's a way for them to go after contraceptive care and access to just birth control. Like, this is a real thing. And, everyone, you're right. A lot of young people got really pissed off when Joe Biden got up there and said, the only way you can fix this is to vote. But then when we give you a majority, and we understand the numbers too. So, right. But other people just don't understand. And we got a majority, but we don't. So when we give you that little bit of majority and you ain't trying to play games like the Republicans would do, because if they had a 1-person majority in the Senate, they would be ramming it all through. Right. We're just now having a conversation about marijuana. Marijuana should have been off the Schedule 1 list the minute he came into office, because there are things that he could have done, Joe Biden could have done, but the man is going to be 86 4 years from 90 if he runs again in 2 years. So he is not stupid like Trump, but it's off. He's old and it's off. And I don't know. But they voted him in. 80 million people voted for the oldest man ever to go to the White House. What can progressives do? What can Democrats even do about all of this?
I mean, I think timing is everything, like you said, and the importance of hitting people heavy and hard, right? We should have had agenda. We should have, as a party, had an agenda of things that we were going to be rolling out leading up to election. Every month we're hitting people with something, right? Roe happened, we need to have a counter, another thing. Marijuana, boom, rectifying that, boom. We wait too late to do things. And I also agree with you, right? You have this small majority and you didn't use that. Sorry. They would have railroaded us. And I think, as Miles mentioned earlier, right, about given the opportunity, when we talk about winning, right? No matter what, we're going to stick together and we're going to go. There's this split even within the party of these people are too progressive, these people are moderate, these people are really conservative. We don't have time to be playing these games when our party and our entire the little upper hand that we have is at stake, right? Instead of really being able to use that, I think is a problem. But I think also just messaging, sometimes we talk about things that like folks just really don't care about. And we forget like the small things. I think we've seen the local races here in Buffalo, right? Forgetting to talk about the small things that everybody, their day-to-day lives are impacted with. We forget to mention those things, right? It's just, oh, well, this big thing, boom. And then hear about something for 4 months and another big thing, instead of just lining it up where we're just getting wins across the board. There should be another stimulus check that should have came out. There should have been more business funding that should have came out. They should just be going crazy right now, giving and giving and giving as much as they can, because honestly, that's at this point, that's the only thing that Trump was able to at least do, was buying people, right? Here's a whole bunch of stimulus checks, right? And that helped him. It's like we're not smart enough to even play the same game, even though we're watching it unfold right in front of us.
Yeah, I think another thing is, it's not just the fault of the Democratic Party. It's the way that the sort of like center left has operated since the end of like World War II. Like what we've seen after the civil rights movement in '68, and especially after the Obama election in 2008, you saw the right really embrace populism. Sometimes it was a reluctant embrace. A lot of established Republicans were dragged along through the Tea Party and then through the ascent of Trump. In some cases, like in other countries, it's been more intentional. Like in Italy, they just got the first right-wing prime minister elected since Mussolini. In Sweden last month, their left-wing government fell. In Sweden, it fell because of a narrative that they had too many asylum seekers, brown asylum seekers, and too little protection from drug gangs from Morocco and other like countries, right? In Italy, the narrative is that white Italians are struggling and they're taking on too many migrants from Africa, right? The right, though, has been willing, it has shown itself willing to engage in real populist discourse. And that's why when we talk about populism on the left or in any kind of democratic circles, populism has a negative connotation, right? But there's a sort of leftist populism too that we haven't tapped into. And when we have tapped into it, we've won, right? Obama kind of tapped into some of that. FDR really tapped into that, right? Now on the left, populism is left to communists who are useless and insufferable. But the rest of us don't really engage with our people, with our base. The right, on the other hand, has been electing candidates that you'd like to have a beer with since the beginning of the century, right? And so I think that's why you have a problem with narrative, because they don't understand the people that they need to be delivering a narrative to, or they really don't want those people too much engaged, right? They always keep, you notice that Democrats are a lot more bold and a lot more aggressive when they're fighting progressives than they are when they're fighting Republicans, right? They really are afraid of the populism that exists on the left, and they want to keep it at arm's length. And because of that, they have either been afraid to or unwilling to come up with a narrative that will really keep people engaged and angry and going to the polls, despite all kinds of opportunities to do so. And until they fix that problem, which is a problem with the center left internationally, not just nationally, I think we're going to run into the same issues here.
Nothing to add. That was everything.
I know that's right. Okay, Miles, that was everything.
Can I also add something, just because it was the topic of conversation? We talked about it at Congressional Black Caucus, last week or 2 weeks ago. Was that we really also have to start really dealing with the issue of white progressives. White progressives are coming into lots of communities of color during these times, telling us what's best for us, right? And then demoralizing us and telling us that we don't know what we're talking about. We don't even know what's in our best interest and what we should be doing, instead of actually allowing us to stand on values together. And I've been seeing this again, both in local, state, and federal races, where you start to see Black voters being interested in being willing, and then white progressives kind of coming in and pushing them away because they feel like they need to tell them how to vote. And this is starting to become a large issue, I think, on the left, with the left, is that, a lot of stuff like democratic socialism may actually align with the needs of our people, but we can't get into it because of the type of people that are coming to tell us about it. And the way they, again, like they demoralize us if we don't agree, right? Oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And how dare you? You need to vote for the best interest of your people. We don't trust white people to tell us how to vote or do anything, because the history of this country has proven that y'all are not trustworthy. Y'all tell us what you think we need to hear, or you force it down our throats. You don't know how to actually have a conversation and win us over. And so I think also in this time is really the importance of having Black consultants and people that actually have proper understandings of what it is that the community needs to be in places to be able to control messaging and communications, because it's clearly not happening with both the moderates and with the progressives. Just want to add that.
I got one more video to play with y'all because we've been talking about how Republicans keep it real and say what they gotta say and mean what they say. So I'm about to play you this clip. This is Representative. What I got. Hold on. I know I got her name somewhere.
My spirit feels exactly what you're about to play. Go on.
You know I'm about to play it.
I know exactly what you're about to play.
Because they don't really sugarcoat the shit. So I'm gonna just go ahead and play Miss Rep Mary out of Illinois. I don't got her name, but we about to play what she said about Roe and the great job Donald Trump did on making sure that we got a 6-3
President Trump,
conservative court.
on behalf of all the MAGA patriots in America, I want to thank you for the historic victory for white life in the Supreme Court yesterday.
Stop. That's it. That's all. That's all I got for the clip, because she said everything we knew. Everything we knew about here. So it's Rep Mary Miller out of Illinois. She's a state rep. And she blatantly said she's excited that they overturned Roe because she wanted to protect white lives and white babies. We all know, and we've been saying for years, that the census is showing that eventually people of color will outnumber white Americans in this country. Abortion gets in the way of that. Access for white women gets in the way of that. And she kept it 100. She tried to backtrack it after, but no one bought it and no one talked about her backtrack because we believed her the first time. So as we have this conversation about Roe, Candace Owens has talked about how abortion is terrible for Black women and how a lot of Black women abort Black babies. But we can have a whole podcast about why we make decisions to do what we want when we want to in regards to family planning, right? Like that's a whole nother conversation. But for them, even white women having access to it is a problem because there should be more of them. What say any of you on that topic?
I mean, as a person with a uterus, and as a mom and as someone who has fertility issues, just thinking of like all the things that could go wrong during pregnancy, right? And the importance of having safe abortions, especially medical conditions concerned. Somebody has to be a scapegoat of society, right? Black people are kind of like being able to kind of position ourselves in positions of power. And they're like, oh my God, we've been focusing on scapegoating Black people, even though the issue is classism that white, rural, and poor white people have bought into, even though they are in the same boat that we're in, that now they're like, oh my God, we're losing population. And God forbid if this is another way for control, because if we don't have enough of them, then we're really outnumbered. And then what are we going to do to be able to uphold white supremacy, right? And the fact that poor white and rural voters aren't thinking with that same sentiment. Like, what do you mean protecting white life? We need to have more people. What do you mean you're controlling this because you want us to be around for what? Should be the question, right? Why do you find our lives so valuable all of a sudden? Why are we all of a sudden the focus when initially they were saying, it's about Black babies and protecting all babies and all lives and all that stuff? I know we talk about intellectual capacity, but I would be concerned. Like, why are you worried about population of us and our demographics? Particularly, what do you mean that we're, and this is going to save our lives, right? Knowing that the conditions of this world and of this country in particular don't care about life after we don't even care about life as they're being born into this world, right? We talk about maternal rates, all types of health and birth issues because of environment, but yet we care about the actual caring to term just to deliver these babies to come into a terrible world that doesn't care about them anyways. But I digress.
Yeah, I Kartika, what you said reminded me of like this joke that George Carlin said about Republicans and abortion. He said, they really care about you. He said from 0 to 9 months, you're fine. And from 0 to 90, you're fucked. Right. I mean, but I think also the sort of, the politics and the reasoning for things on the left, and by left, I'm talking about from middle of center all the way left. We talk about stuff a lot, right? Like the Republicans, their kind of political analysis and the right-wing political analysis is a little more sophisticated sometimes than we give it credit for, I think. They have been concerned about falling fertility rates among white folks for decades now. This isn't something that they just started worrying about, right? This is something that they're seeing. Part of the reason they have immigration issues in Europe, right, is because they brought in immigrants from other parts of the world because of, aging populations in Europe to replace their workforce. And the same thing has happened in the US. But if you listen to I do a lot of I listen to a lot of right-wing media just for opposition research. This narrative of white folks being kind of outbred by Black and brown people in this country, this narrative of them losing their culture and their civilization to Black and brown hordes, right? This is a common narrative. And so when she said, thank you, President Trump, for protecting white lives, a lot of stuff, a lot of those people understood exactly what she was saying. And they've been on that type of time for a minute, so a lot of those folks who we would say, well, why aren't they questioning? They made up their minds, a lot of them, that their lives were really important and that they were, afraid of being outnumbered by us a long time ago. That's why they are so virulently against immigration. That's why, they don't care when Black people get killed by the police, because one more dead Black person is, it helps their numbers, right? This is the same culture that came up with manifest destiny and decided that, the Nazis talked about, what was it, Lebensraum, I think, or living space, when they annexed Czechoslovakia and Eastern Europe. But white folks in this country came up with that, right? That was their thing, right? Before it was living space, it was called manifest destiny. And they cleared out a whole continent so that they would have, that they would be able to exercise their divine right to populate the earth. So this is a philosophy that has very old and deep roots. And this kind of particular facet of white supremacy is coming back into fashion now that their populations are getting older and are, I don't want to use the word replaced because that kind of sets them off, as we saw in Charlottesville. But as their numbers are going down, and Black and brown folks are still frustratingly fertile to them, and so they're hoping that abortion will kind of cure that. Although it would be interesting to see how many of these kids, what they grow up like, knowing that their moms never wanted to have them and that they were forced to by the government. I'd be curious to see what side they end up on. But
yeah, I really don't have anything substantive to add. I will say, though, that the credit should be given to Mitch McConnell and not Donald Trump. It was really his brilliance that secured that Supreme Court majority and not Donald Trump.
I agree 100%. He plays to win.
Dejan, she did it to me too. Kenna, you muted my homeboy over there. I could tell.
I unmuted it though.
She sure muted me. That was just rude.
Didn't I unmute it?
Raggedy.
I thought I went and unmuted it again because I seen that I did that.
And then she started her closing spiel. It's all right. We can go ahead and end it.
I was not. But thank God this is getting edited.
I will just co-sign Mitch McConnell is an evil genius. He's evil, but he is brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's right to learn evil from an enemy. So
yeah. And yeah.
Him and his lack of chin. What he lacks in chin, he makes up in brain.
Ooh, child, the editor gonna have fun with this. I'm having to do a blooper.
I don't know if
Probably
anybody
looks.
likes Star Wars, but does he resemble Emperor Palpatine to any of you?
I think if he lives another 20 years, yes. Yes.
The editor.
Yeah, because Natalie Nunn could share her chin with him and then they'd be even.
Ooh, you went for it.
It is what it is.
You know. Well, anyway, as I pivot to the final question, folks, because this has been a real spicy conversation, and Miles is the winner on potential titles for this podcast. So there's a few little zingers he said that I had to write down. But my question for all of you is, what do you think is at stake for this upcoming election? Why is it so important?
Okay, so on January 6th of 2021, we narrowly avoided a fascist fucking coup. Okay, and now it's like a year and a half later, and we might vote these fuckers back into office. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you people, the American people? Like that's what's at stake here. Really is, we've seen, the beer hall putsch, and now we're waiting for the Nazis to take over the Reichstag. I mean, that's where we are historically, right? And so there's quite a bit at stake. As we just talked about with Mitch McConnell, if the Republicans have control of one house of the legislature, they can do a lot of damage. They are way more aggressive and they play to win, unlike Democrats. And so we cannot give them an inch. And if we do, we are not that far away from seeing babies put in cages at the border, and a president who wanted to who asked the military about the sort of the feasibility of gunning down Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C. That's the kind of government that we are on the way to getting back. We're already seeing in states where they control, women have had their right to bodily autonomy taken away. Children are being taught alternate versions of history that comport with their white supremacist leanings. I mean, that is what's at stake. And frankly, the fact that anybody has to convince anyone in this country to get off their asses and vote is infuriating. But as political consultants, that's our job. So, for all of these folks who are doing GOTV this year, I hope that y'all understand how important this shit is, because a lot is at stake. I know that people say that every year, but in these last, few election cycles, with the rise of fascism in this country, it is becoming more and more important that we stop them everywhere. So, anybody else?
Ooh, he petty. Go ahead, John. Floor's yours.
Well, since you're already speaking, go ahead.
The editor gonna be like, what the hell is wrong with these people? I'm just echoing everything that Miles said. I think literally our lives are at stake, and I've been saying that over the past couple of years. I mean, especially since Trump won his election, our actual lives are at stake. Like, we don't actually have the time and capacity to wait. I mean, we're literally watching women's rights being taken away, and then it's like we're like slowly rolling back all the rights, right? Who knows if we lose this midterm election, and God forbid in 2 years we get a Republican president, God forbid Donald Trump again. Like, what would that look like for us? And I don't really think we want to fathom what it looks like for Black and brown folks, what it looks like for immigrant and refugees, what it looks like for people in the mental health field, because I don't think anybody has anything left to give at this point, what it'll look like for mass shootings and school shootings, what it could look like for women, what it could look like for gay people. Like, I mean, if you fall into any category that is not a straight white man, really, your life is at stake. And for the white women who continue to uphold white supremacy, it ain't only but so long before y'all be a target of something. And so I think, we have to start looking at it from all angles at this point.
I think we lost our host, but I think the question sort of needs to be reframed. Every time an election comes around, we say, what's at stake in this election? The fact of the matter is, anytime there's an election, our entire lives are at stake. We talked a bit about Dobbs and how that decision hints at a possible overturning of Obergefell, which legalized gay marriage across the country, or doing away with the right to obtain contraceptives. I think the case that Miles outlined is very real. Folks don't realize how close we are to a Republican majority, not just in the federal level, but across states, to the point that they could hypothetically create constitutional amendments and pass it on a one-party line. Like, we are at this point in history where I think ultimately the fate of our democracy, this little experiment, is truly at stake. We've said that time and time again in the past, but this is one of the moments where it's never been more clear. I mean, January 6th was a nightmare, and I really don't want to see something like that happen again. But what I think people are missing is that the next time a January 6th happens, it'll be quiet, and it'll be done by those in power. And so to prevent that, we really just need to turn out to vote. Not just this election, every election.
Listen, I was sitting there muting myself for that 20 seconds. Isn't that fitting? Seeing that I can't mute other people. Well, listen, this was an awesome conversation. I'm so excited that I was able to invite you all on this podcast, and also, be able to get an hour of your busy schedules, because I know how important all of you are. So again, I just want to say thank you to all three of you for hopping on this podcast. I'm excited about starting it the way we did today. Like, this was just an awesome conversation. And I think that, what I've got planned for the rest of this podcast is going to be lit, because we started and we got it popping early. So, thank you to all my listeners for even considering listening to another podcast. Of course, this is a mini series, a spinoff of Citizen the Pod. And I'm excited to do this as we get ready to, walk into November 8th. And, as stated so wonderfully by my guest, like, the state of this union is really, will really take a shift depending on who is pulling the levers of power in Congress on November 9th, and not even November 9th, on January, sometime in January, when they decide to swear in the new Congress. So I'm excited for all of you to hear what I have going on next. I want you to keep it spicy. That's going to be my closing for this, for this podcast. I want all of y'all to keep it spicy. And keep it spicy means fight for what you want, be who you want to be, make decisive decisions, and be a part of the process. Because if you're not there, then we get nowhere. So thank you all for joining my first episode of Citizen the Pod's mini series, Argue with Your Mama, Not Me. I will make sure I tag all of my guests so y'all all can follow them. Y'all know y'all can follow me on Instagram at Kina Zontel, on Facebook at Kina Zontel, and on Twitter at Kina Zontail and Citizen the Pod. And I'm trying to figure out how I can do a TikTok called Argue With Your Mama, Not Me, but I signed in with my Gmail account. That is too much information, and this might get edited by the editor, but if it's in there, it's in the blooper section. So thank y'all so much for hopping on, and have a good week. Until next time, bye.